Sorry, sir, you need current proof of address within this county and a valid photo ID. Rules are rules, the volunteer coordinator said, her voice tight with practiced refusal. George Miller, 69, stood clutching a worn canvas bag, his stomach aching with a hunger that gnawed deeper than the November chill outside. He'd walked 3 miles to reach the community food bank, hoping for just enough to get through the next few days. He simply nodded, his weathered face showing disappointment but not surprise. Understand, he murmured, stepping back from the bustling counter. Just 6 minutes later, the loading bay doors rolled open, not for the usual delivery truck, but for a sleek black car, followed by forklifts bearing pallets piled high with premium groceries. The operation was commanded by a man whose quiet authority silenced the entire warehouse. If you believe compassion should outweigh bureaucracy, type humanity below. George Miller knew hunger. He'd known it in frozen foxholes decades ago, a primal ache overshadowed only by cold and fear. He'd known it intermittently in the years since, navigating the difficult terrain of re-entry into a world that felt alien after years of service in places barely acknowledged on maps. Now, in his later years, after a series of misfortunes, a lost job due to ageism, depleted savings following a medical emergency, and the slow erosion of his support network, hunger was a more constant, weary companion. He lived for the moment in the city's sprawling homeless encampment down by the river, a place of quiet desperation hidden behind a veneer of overgrown brush. His worldly possessions fit into the faded olive-drab rucksack he carried everywhere, a relic from his army days. Its canvas was softened with age but still sturdy. Today, the gnawing emptiness in his gut had become unbearable. He'd heard about the City Harvest Food Bank, a large warehouse distribution center funded by various charities and city grants. He didn't like asking for help, his pride a stubborn remnant of a lifetime of self-reliance, but necessity had worn it thin. He'd spent his last few dollars on bus fare to get across town, then walked the final mile. The hope for a few cans of soup and some bread pushed him forward against the biting wind. The warehouse buzzed with activity, volunteers sorting donations, forklifts moving pallets, clients waiting patiently in lines, their faces reflecting a similar blend of hope and weariness that George felt in his bones. The scale of the operation was impressive yet impersonal. He joined the shortest line, clutching his rucksack and observing the process. The intake counter was managed by Diane Peterson, the volunteer coordinator. Diane was in her late 40s, efficient, stressed, and fiercely protective of the food bank's resources and rules. She believed firmly in procedure, seeing it as the only way to manage overwhelming demand fairly and prevent fraud. She'd seen people try to game the system, double-dipping, coming from outside the designated service area, exaggerating need. Her default setting had become skepticism, her empathy worn thin by the sheer volume of need and occasional deception. She processed the clients ahead of George with brisk efficiency, checking IDs, verifying addresses against her computer database, handing out pre-approved voucher slips. Her tone was clipped and professional, leaving little room for nuance or explanation. When George finally reached the counter, Diane looked up, her eyes quickly scanning his appearance, the worn clothes, the rucksack, the lines of hardship on his face. Her internal checklist flagged him immediately: potential transient, likely no verifiable local address, high probability of being outside the service area or having visited too recently. Yes, she asked, her voice already tinged with preemptive refusal. George placed his rucksack gently on the floor beside him. Good morning. I was hoping to receive some assistance today. First time here, he spoke quietly, politely. Diane's fingers flew across her keyboard. Name, George Miller. Address, George hesitated. Currently, I don't have a fixed address in this county. I'm staying down by the river encampment temporarily. Diane stopped typing. Her expression hardened. I see. Do you have photo identification? George shook his head apologetically. Lost my wallet a few weeks back. Haven't had the funds or necessary documents to replace my ID yet. Diane sighed, a sound laden with "I knew it." Sir, I'm sorry, but the rules are very clear. To receive assistance, you must provide proof of residency within this county, a utility bill, lease agreement, official mail, and a valid photo ID. It's required by our funding agencies to prevent duplicate services and ensure resources go to local residents. I understand the need for rules, George said patiently, but I haven't eaten properly in 2 days. Isn't there any kind of emergency provision? Just something small? Diane shook her head firmly, already turning her attention back to her computer screen, signaling the end of the interaction. No ID, no proof of address, no service. Those are the regulations. We have to apply them consistently to everyone. She gestured vaguely toward a pamphlet rack. There might be other shelters or soup kitchens listed there that have different requirements. Her tone implied he was wasting her time better spent on legitimate clients who followed the rules. George saw the finality in her posture, the bureaucratic wall firmly in place. He knew arguing would be futile, would only cause a scene and potentially jeopardize access for others later. He felt a surge of frustration quickly banked down by years of practiced stoicism. He wasn't asking for a handout, just a hand up, a basic human need met by an organization whose stated mission was exactly that. Yet the rules applied rigidly and without context formed an insurmountable barrier. A younger volunteer nearby overhearing the exchange looked uncomfortable, catching George's eye with a sympathetic glance before quickly looking away. Unwilling to challenge Diane's authority, George picked up his rucksack, the emptiness inside seeming to echo the emptiness in his stomach. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly, his voice betraying none of the despair churning inside him. He turned away from the counter, moving toward the warehouse exit, another door closed, another hope extinguished. He stepped outside the main warehouse floor into the slightly less chaotic receiving area near the entrance, needing a moment to gather himself before facing the long walk back with nothing to show for it. He leaned against a stack of empty pallets, the smell of cardboard and disinfectant sharp in the air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out, not a phone but a small laminated card. It wasn't an ID but more like a reference card, bearing only a complex alphanumeric code and a single unlisted toll-free number. It was an emergency contact provided years ago by a very specific benefactor for situations of extreme unforeseen administrative failure within charitable networks he supported. George had never used it, always finding another way, too proud or too hesitant to pull such a string. But today, the combination of genuine need and the inflexible bureaucracy felt different, felt like a system failure worth noting. With a sigh, he borrowed the phone from the sympathetic young volunteer who had followed him out, quickly dialing the number from his card. The call connected instantly to a calm professional voice. "Croft Foundation Oversight. Please provide your reference code." George read the alphanumeric code from his laminated card. There was a pause, the sound of typing, then the voice returned, slightly warmer. "Understood. Please state the nature of the issue and the specific affiliate location." George briefly, factually explained the situation. City Harvest Food Bank Warehouse Branch denied basic emergency food assistance due to lack of local photo ID and fixed address, despite clear indication of need. Coordinator cited inflexible adherence to standard intake regulations. Requesting notification of potential systemic barrier for vulnerable populations at this donation point. "Understood," the voice replied. "Location confirmed. Stand by near the facility entrance if possible." Notification escalated. "Thank you for the report." The call ended. It had taken less than a minute. George handed the phone back to the young volunteer with a quiet thank you. He didn't know exactly what, if anything, would happen, but he had reported the gap in the system as intended. He prepared himself for the long walk back, adjusting his rucksack. He glanced back toward the intake counter where Diane was dealing with the next person in line, oblivious. 5 minutes passed. George shifted his weight, the hunger making him feel slightly dizzy. Then the distinct sound of multiple luxury vehicles pulling into the facility's restricted parking area near the loading docks, not the usual delivery trucks. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows rolled to a stop, followed immediately by a large black SUV. Doors opened, and several figures emerged. One was instantly recognizable from countless magazine covers and news reports: Alexander Croft, the reclusive tech billionaire philanthropist whose Croft Foundation was, George knew, the single largest private donor to the City Harvest Food Bank network. Croft wasn't flashy. He wore dark jeans, a simple gray cashmere sweater, and expensive but understated leather shoes. But his presence radiated an intense, focused energy. With him were two aides carrying tablets and a woman George recognized from the foundation's website as Dr. Elena Rios, the executive director. Croft's eyes scanned the area, bypassing the main entrance and heading directly toward the loading bay and receiving.